All right, golfers, there's some common reasons I see golfers struggle to compress the golf ball. Compression, especially with the irons, is really tied to how much forward shaft lean a player can obtain when they strike the ball. So again, if I lean the shaft forward, my low point moves forward, the ball speed comes out much faster, and you get that nice sound that everyone says, oh, he compressed that ball. So let's talk about the ways we can either add some shaft lean or maybe some things we want to avoid that would maybe take shaft lean away. The first thing I want to talk about is early extension. This is a common phrase that gets thrown around, right? Where the pelvis moves in towards the ball and the chest gets further away from the ground. So that last part is very important there. As the chest gets further away from the ground, remember, we have an intent to strike this golf ball. So if I'm wanting to hit the ground and the ball kind of right here, if I move my chest up and away from the ground, you're going to see that the club gets further off the ground. Now, that's not going to work if I keep the shaft leaning forward, because that actually brings that club head even further off the ground. What does work if my chest is moving away from the ground is to get this club as long as possible down by the ball and lose all my shaft lean. So I'll frequently see players that suffer from some early extension where the chest bumps up, the pelvis maybe moves in. These players will struggle to deliver any shaft lean because of the physics of how getting the golf club to the ground works. Again, if I wanted some forward shaft lean, I could do that. But now all of a sudden my chest needs to be lower to get the club head back down to the ground. So there's a little bit of physics at play here, where if your chest is bumping up and out of the shot, I'm not saying it's impossible, but it is much more difficult to get that shaft to lean forward, just because we know we need to get that club down to the ground, and releasing these angles and getting the club as long as possible is a good way to do it. Now, reason number 2 is going to be an open club face. And what I mean by open is on the way down, kind of particularly late stages of the downswing, if the toe of the club is pointed back up and behind the player, it's going to be very difficult to create shaft lean, because adding shaft lean is something that will typically open the face even more. So if I took the club and I pinned it right here, you can see kind of the arrow there pointing straight out. If I took the shaft and I started leaning it forward, 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 you're going to see that face angle wants to point more and more to the right. So it doesn't really make sense for a player that has that has an open club face in the downswing to add more shaft lean, because all of a sudden impact becomes very non-functional. There's no reason to do that unless you want to hit it 80 yards to the right every single time, right? So what this player learns to do, if you lean the handle backwards, you can actually get that club face to point more and more to the left for a right-handed player. So again, if that face is really open on the way down, what I'll often see players do is they've learned subconsciously that if they keep their hands behind the ball, they add a bunch of extension to the lead wrist, and they leave, again, they don't have any shaft lean, they can get that face angle to point pretty straight. However, so you can see that arrow pointing very straight now. However, when they get to impact, their hands are behind the ball, they've added loft to the club, and they've severely kind of influenced the low point to be a little bit more behind the ball. So that particular element of the swing has been kind of compromised, and it's very difficult to hit good golf shots consistently from that position. So if that's you, you need to make sure that club face is coming down in a little bit more stronger position. If you hit a couple to the left, just understand that's probably part of the learning curve. What you then need to do after the face is in a better position is kind of make sure those hands are in front of the golf ball, that you're leaning the shaft a little bit more forward to offset how you've adjusted the face angle in the downswing, okay? Now, number 3 is going to be kind of the movement of the body in the entire swing. So I'll often see players that struggle to compress the ball get the movement of the lead shoulder working way too vertically in the downswing. Now, sometimes this is in order to shallow the club. So this is where coaching can be very beneficial. You know, if I come down with a very steep club and all of a sudden I start tilting the left shoulder up and the right shoulder down, you can see how that has a shallowing effect to the club. However, what this does from the face-on view is it starts tilting my shoulders excessively upwards towards the sky. It moves the low point back, and it really shallows out the angle of attack. So it's very difficult to get forward shaft lean. It's very difficult to compress the golf ball. So what this player needs to do is, first, they need to make sure they're not doing that as a compensating factor to the club being out of position in the early stages of the downswing. That would be kind of trick number 1. Number 2 is you need to get the feeling of keeping this left shoulder a little bit lower and getting it to rotate a little bit more open so that you can cover the golf ball a little bit better, versus tilting the lead shoulder up and away and getting it pointed towards the sky and moving that low point back. So what I'll often tell players to do is focus a lot on their neck tilt. So it doesn't get talked about a lot, but as you elevate that lead shoulder, you can see my right ear gets a lot lower than my left ear, almost like I'm dripping water out of my right ear. So I'll ask players to feel the exact opposite in this scenario. I'll ask them to go up to the top, try and drip water out of their left ear, because that influences their body to want to stay left tilted a little bit longer, and then also move their face less behind the ball, but more in front of the ball to kind of get that body twisting and staying in their leftward tilt a little bit longer. So again, where your face points and how your neck tilts has a big influence on how the body's going to move. If you can get up to the top and start moving your face in front of the ball and start feeling that lead ear maybe a little bit lower than the trail ear, well, now it's a lot easier to keep that lead side lower, rotate through, cover the ball, and maybe compress that ball a little bit better. So thanks for watching.